if there's any booksellers listening to this, I'm so sorry. But I have learned that if you do an event, if you go physically to a bookstore, they're gonna think you're local and treat you like you're local. And that's what I want at the end of the day. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Most Writers and Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to jump right into our segment. And instead of an interview today, I'm talking to my friend Dustin, and you're kind of going to be like a fly on the wall while we sort of like go through my goals and how I sort of like plan out my year and my schedule. I thought this might help you guys like with your New Year's goals and things. So hang tight. And we'll be right back. I'm not gonna take up too much of your time. We're gonna jump right into it. So here we go. Welcome to Most Writers or Fans. My name is Terry Bartley, and I am joined by my friend Dustin Whitman, who was in a mini-sode a while ago. We talked about the X-Men. What we're gonna be doing in this episode, I realize that it's the beginning of the year, and people are setting goals and trying to figure out how to do things, especially creative people. And I thought that this might be a good opportunity to kind of like help people see what I do to kind of like keep myself accountable and on track. And I've said in all of my acknowledgement pages that Dustin has been a big part of sort of like keeping me on track. And we're kind of going to be displaying that on this call, on this episode is what we're doing. Well, my goal here is for us to just do sort of like our typical check-in call like we do ideally once a month. Has been Dustin just checked whenever he updated the document last. It was on August. And if you remember, my intros for the past several months have been me saying, I feel so behind. This is probably why. Because I've not actually been checking in and holding myself accountable. Because I always feel like the key to setting goals and keeping to them is you have to have somebody that keeps track of them. You have to have somebody that you report back to, because then you feel bad about saying, oh, I haven't done that. And you only can feel bad for so long till you realize I either don't care about that thing, it's not important, I should not do it, or I need to actually start doing it because this does matter to me. Why do I keep not doing it? I think that doing this kind of thing forces you to sort of like take a look at yourself and your goals and kind of like reassess them regularly. So Dustin, like you said, it's been since August since we've checked in. Also, hi Dustin, thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to do this episode with you.
Yeah, we got a lot to catch up on since August, I'm sure.
Yeah. So basically, to give people a bit of a background, my next novel should be coming out August of this year. That is the goal. That's kind of the big thing we're doing. We have a lot of little steps of that. Like I'm planning on doing an audiobook pretty soon. We have a Kickstarter we're going to be doing, and we've laid out like every sort of like step along that way. But it's probably going to be shifting dates a bit because, like I said, we've not checked in since August. So Dustin, sort of go through what we've talked about, and then I'll kind of like respond to each item as we get to them, to where I am and what needs to be done, and if anything needs to be changed because I've not done them or it seems like maybe I don't want to do them anymore.
So I'll just go through. I've got, a lot of random notes here that I take. I'm all over the place, but I will go through the little timeline that we've set up. So again, this was August the 12th. So it said by November 1st, novel edits round one were supposed to be completed.
Phew, no, not at all. Let's see where we're at. I've been editing it. I have actually been editing it lately, so that makes me feel a little better that I'm at least doing the thing. Let me pull up. So yeah, in my edit for editor thing, I've gotten up to chapter 14 is where I've gotten to. And that sounds like a pretty good progress when you realize that I have 54 chapters. So
I was getting ready to say, wait, how many chapters are there again?
so I mean, I think it's not bad progress. It's not where I should be when I wanted to be done a month ago. But like I think it's not the worst. Like I think I'm in a place where I probably could finish it by the end of the month or so if I like keep at it. And again, I think that part of this is like being realistic. Like, like this year's been bad for everybody, right? Like that's not untrue. And also, like, this year was especially hard for me because my grandma she was in the hospital earlier this year. And since then, my family and I have had to like take turns staying with her. And what that has looked like for me a lot is I stay with her on the weekends, the full weekends, which for the record would be some writing time for me that I would have. And now is like, it's hard to concentrate when I have to take care of her, right? Like my mind's just not in a space to write. And then also I try to get meals ready, like dinners ready for my family every night so that it's not a thing on their plate. So like that's a lot of like stuff that I'm doing that I usually wouldn't be doing that has kind of like hindered me a bit. So I think that being realistic here is just like yeah, like it makes sense that I'm behind because like I've just not been as focused. And also this whole other thing I mentioned, I talked about my therapist with this a little bit ago. Is this idea that like school has been harder for me this year? Like me as a teacher has been harder because my classes are more demanding. I was only teaching honors classes and electives for a very long time, for like the past couple of years, whenever I was like peak writing. And I'm
Hmm.
doing like not honors classes this year. I have a class that has like 45 kids, non exaggeration. And it's not like easy. Like it's a lot of work to like prep and like make sure everything goes smoothly. And like I have to actively be teaching a lot more than I was with the honors kids. Because like honors kids, you
Hmm.
can kind of like give them an assignment and let them go and kind of like expect them to do the work, and they usually do. You can't really do that with non-honors kids. Like you'd have to be more like checking on them regularly and things. And so like a lot of times whenever the honors kids were working on stuff, I could do some of my writing and not feel guilty about it because like they were working, I was working. It was kind of like a nice setup. I don't really
Yeah.
have that as much these days. And also like I'm grading a lot more because I have more classes that have grades associated with them than I did in the past couple of years. So I think that that's part of why I've been like a little behind where I should be. So like part of this is like being realistic. Like I'm not mad at myself for being behind, right? Like I'm comfortable with where I am, but I think that maybe it's possible that I need to think about shifting some of this stuff a little further down. Like I think that maybe 2 months is like a generous, reasonable amount of time they give me to finish up this book. Because full disclosure, I've only been editing actively within the past couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this time was me
Yeah.
shifting into this new normal, and I wasn't really even in a place to even consider like actively making these like edits. So I think that if I start doing it now, 2 months feels reasonable to me. So I think maybe moving it to like March 1st is maybe a good place to move that to.
Okay, let me go ahead and put this in here. And is that still round one of the edits, or for it to be completely edited
That
by?
is for sure round one. That is because what I would like to do, what I'm envisioning, and maybe this is a good thing for people that are writing to know. I don't know. What I'm envisioning is so Kirsha, my editor, has already edited the book. She's given me edits. She's given me suggestions. She's gone through. She's given me notes. What I'm doing, I'm going through and making edits based on her suggestions and like changing things based on what she's saying I should do. But then I'm also leaving notes at the very bottom of each chapter that says notes from Terry to revisit later. And what I'd love to do is to try to get Kirsha back to kind of like go back through the chapters, read my notes, and see if there's any suggestions that she sees. This way, it's sort of like it makes my goal with this book, because this is my first like novel, right? Like my last book was a short story collection. This is my first like novel. And I really want it to be the best book it can be. And I think that that will sort of like help me get there because I'll have done edits. I've had left notes. Kirsha then can go through, read the new versions, and if there's anything else that she sees based on what I'm telling her, then she can give me new suggestions, right? That sounds like
Yeah.
a good strategy. And then, so she can do that in March, then maybe by like, give her till April to do her what she needs to do. Then that can give me maybe another couple months if we're going to do that. So that
Hmm.
means she'll be finishing her edits by like April. So then that would give me until like June. What this is telling me is we maybe move the release of the book to maybe like, and guys, this is like heartbreaking for the record because we've already moved the release of this book a year, right? But I think that it makes sense to move it another year. I think it makes sense just because of where we're at and what's been going on.
Yeah, I agree. You don't want to, this is your baby. You don't want to rush it. So you want to make sure
Yeah.
that
Well,
the
and
book
like,
that you want out is the one that's released and not something that's like, I set this date and this is what I'm going to put out regardless.
yeah. And two, I think that like, if I want to do the Kickstarter right, if I want to get the audiobook produced right, I need to give myself time. Like I have to give myself like more time to do that. So I think that that's probably
Yeah.
what has to happen is that book needs to get pushed out a year. And maybe I've toyed with the idea. Whenever I was at Lavender Con, I was toying with the idea of like doing some like a compilation book where I get other authors to like contribute short stories, and like Starlight King Press could then release like a short story collection. Maybe would be
Hmm.
like a charity fundraiser kind of deal. Like whatever proceeds I get from that, I could give to like I'm like a family in Palestine or something. Like something that is like legitimately helpful for the world. And then that would still allow me to have something out released, you know. There'll be less work
Yeah.
for me, like still work for me because I have to go through and make sure these stories are good. But I trust my friends, right? I trust people that are professional writers to be doing good work. And then I would just have to write a short story that I could then contribute to this collection, whatever we decide the theme is, which feels
Yeah.
maybe like a good way to go
Yeah. Now, okay, what date do we want to give that?
for the
Or
short story, the new thing I just
yeah,
came
for
up with.
this, yeah, the thing
Let's
you
put that.
just came up with.
Let's slot that into where the original book was going to come out. So August.
Okay.
So I guess like August 12th. But then I could have a thing to promote if I go to festivals or whatever that's new. I'd have a thing to talk about on social media. And also, again, throwing this out there because I sometimes feel like once we do these things, I'm like, this is actually a good idea and actually like better than what we had planned originally. Which is like, there's going to be a slew of authors sending people to my social media and to my website, which like, that's not a bad idea before I start on a Kickstarter. So like,
Yeah.
maybe this is actually like a better strategy than what we had before anyway. So, you know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that going back and like going through this stuff and throwing things at the wall, I think that's how you come up with new and great ideas. So let me see. Let me see. Hold on, I've got some conflicting notes here. A novel Kickstarter ending at the end of May. Actually I have the Kickstarter on this list. I don't think we have an official date for that. Okay, so another thing, so the next thing, we didn't really have anything else for the rest of 2024. We have a January the 10th Enzo draft, if I could talk, Enzo draft finished, soon to be edited.
Yeah,
So,
so that's nowhere close. I haven't even looked at the Enzo book in I want to say 2-3 months. For listeners, Enzo is a character from the novel. I've been doing these like prequel books that none of them have been released, so it'll be weird for people to. I mean, Karuk is a character in the novel. Karuk is a character that has a book that's out, who's also in Tyranny of the Fae. Basically, her light novel that is out now, which is just kind of like an extra to Tyranny of the Fae. I'm envisioning releasing those for many of the main characters for the novel, and Enzo was kind of like the first of those I was planning to release post Karuk. So yeah, I'm not. So that's for sure getting pushed back.
okay. Do we want to come back to that one or go ahead and,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
We'll come back to that in a second. Just leave a note.
My style of writing on Post-its while also typing into a document isn't confusing at all. Let's see.
That's why you
That's,
got to get you a Dustin if you're a writer. You got to get somebody like him in your life that understands how his systems work. And I don't need to know how they work because I'm not
yeah.
looking at them.
If something happens to me and someone tries to make sense of this, it will be like, it's like, what key do we need to decipher this encrypted? It's not. This is just how I take notes. Um, okay, let's see. So you're supposed to have the voice actors, 5 voice actors for audiobook on board this month. It doesn't have a specific date.
Okay, so part of me feels like that needs to be. I mean, that obviously needs to be pushed back. Like that feels sort of obvious. That needs to
Yeah,
be pushed back.
yeah.
But I kind of feel like it wouldn't hurt to still start getting them together to give myself plenty of lead time. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe start getting people on board so I can get the best people I can.
Hmm.
And also, not for nothing, as an indie author, it's good to pay people ahead of time over a longer period of time so that I don't have to like come up with all the money all at one time. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So again, this is sort of how we do this. So I'm going to go through some of these things that are going to feel a little woo woo, a little weird, but I do them a lot whenever I set goals, which is I looked at a bit of the astrology for this year and I set some dates based on whenever the astrology was looking good. Because the way that I view astrology, like I'm a little witchy. I do a live stream with D&D where like I'm with other queer witches. So like I'm not witchy. But the way that I think of astrology is like if it's good for a certain day or for a certain kind of thing, why take the chance? Like if you can do a thing that day that's like useful and productive, that is using the astrology, like, why not, like, hope that if the luck works, then it works. If it doesn't work, you still did the thing you had to do. So it's still like worthwhile. So one day that's good for like collaboration and like making partnerships was February 3rd of this year. So things that I had put on this day, I'm probably going to change what they are now, but I think that this day might still be able to be used for some stuff. I was going to email Lucas, the publicist guy that I met in New York that one time, to try
Hmm.
to help me with try to hire him for the book. I'm not going to do that now because I don't need him right now. I was going to reach out to books with the biggest guests for the podcast, which I think maybe you still do. That still sounds good. Then I was going to email friends of partnering for like my book release events, and I had like started a list of people to reach out to. I think now maybe email people about writing for the compilation that day.
Okay. So February the 1st, you're gonna email.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had very slowly pitched this idea, like very lightly pitched this idea to Kyle Prue, the TikTok guy that I talked to on my podcast,
Yeah.
and he was game. So if I can get him to help me promote it, like that's huge. And feels like a really good outlet, not just for me, but for these other indie authors I'll be working with, and
Hmm.
like for the charity potentially too. Then I was gonna announce the
Okay.
Kickstarter on February 9th. Like I was gonna like announce it, not do it. Let's maybe not do that now, though I could do a Kickstarter for the short story compilation,
Yeah.
which would do what we did with the first book. So I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast. Tyranny of the Fae, the point of it was less about me releasing a book and more about me learning how to release a book. So whenever my novel comes out, we knew how to do it. I feel like maybe doing that with Kickstarter isn't the worst idea. So I'm not going blind, my first time.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely could work. What was the date again?
That was going to be February 9th.
Very nice.
I think that the astrology for this was something like this is like a good time to like announce your biggest projects or something like that. Like it's like be vocal about the things you do or whatever. I'm really good at astrology, guys. But that feels like maybe a good time to do it still because I could still sort of learn a bit about how to do Kickstarter and crowdfunding and also have a ton of people subscribe to the Starlight King Press Kickstarter account whenever they
Yeah.
donate to this charity short story book. So like that's maybe a good call.
Yeah.
So all I
Yeah.
got to do between now and then is come up with a theme, which again is not hard. It's just like, here's some topic.
So you're gonna come up with the theme before you send out the email, presumably?
But before I launch the Kickstarter, it makes sense, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, before I email them too, maybe be good because then I could just tell them, hey, I'm looking for short stories about this.
Yeah. Yeah. That way, it's like they don't, that way you don't come back later with a theme and they're like, well, actually I was thinking about doing this, but now that doesn't fit. If
Yeah.
you have the theme when you first talk to them, it's probably.
Well, and also I like the idea of not just having my friends be part of it, but also to like announce it as like an open submission process. Because it gives me the opportunity as a publisher to then also like read new authors, sort of like see if there's anybody out there that gels with what I do, and also just
Hmm.
get to lift up a couple of people that maybe haven't had the opportunity to get lifted up before. So
Yeah.
also those
Okay.
would give me so like I'll basically be announcing the book. Like I'll be announcing the short story collection and that there will be a Kickstarter then. Then the Kickstarter was going to launch on April 6th was my plan.
Okay. So you want to move the start of the Kickstarter from February the 9th
No, no,
to
no, no, no.
April?
I'll be announcing it on February, but I won't actually
Okay.
launch it until that way I can like have people like know it exists and be doing the open call for submissions, things like that,
Okay. And
getting
then what
names
day in
attached to
April?
it. April 6th.
April 6th. All right. Okay. So let's see what else we've got on the list. February 28th, Star Celeste book draft finished, sent to be edited.
What was the date there?
February 20th.
Well, I don't think that's a good time because we're going to be working on the novel then. But I think that's maybe worth doing while Kirsch is doing the second edit. So maybe like March 31st is what I'll move that to because then I could go ahead and get that together while she's doing stuff because I can't do as much while she's editing it, right?
Okay. Now, I know we said we come back to it, but we're getting into the like the Star Celeste book and everything. The Enzo book, do you want to set a date for any of that stuff before we start
I
filling out the
do.
dates?
I
Is
should
that
probably
it's
because that's
not
the one that I want.
something,
So
is that
the
the one you
Enzo
want
book.
out before?
So that was the one that, just to give the listeners some context, did they listen to the intros a few episodes ago? I had talked about how this was a book that I had presented a chapter of it to my writing group on a Gotham Writers workshop, and they were all like, "This is incredible. We love this. We want more of it." And then I was like, "Well, damn it, it's good." Like I wanted to just release this and not care about it, and so it was like frustrating that it's like good enough that I should like try. So this is the one that I wanted to query. I wanted to like actually query this one with agents, which I haven't done for a long time. So that one maybe is good to work on over the next year once the Star and Celeste book is finished editing. You know what I'm saying? That way, while I'm
Hmm.
getting voice actors together and stuff, I could then work on this book. Then maybe even start querying it before like the novel comes out.
Okay. Okay.
So okay, so if I'm editing it in April, this will probably be my last take. Like, I'll probably be, after whatever is done in April, I'll probably be done. So let's give me 2 months, April, May. Then by June, I should be in a pretty okay spot to like figure out what's happening after that. And also, like, this book is in such a weird phase because I've got the cover and stuff made already. So like very little of it is there to do once I get the edits done. Like it's basically good to go once the edits are done. Um, it's just sort of about planning the promotion stuff around it. So yeah, I think probably by like June, I'll be in a pretty good spot to then work on other stuff. And I could maybe start getting like some beta readers. It'd be crazy to get ARC readers, right? Because ARC readers are like your advanced readers. I shouldn't do that before I start actually promoting the book, right? That seems crazy.
Yeah. You don't want ARC readers until after you've started the promotion.
Okay. So yeah, I think just have it done. And then in June, I could start doing the Enzo book. So let's just give me the summer. Let's say like by the end of like September, I can have the Enzo book finished, ready for edits.
Okay. I gotta remember what year it is, and that is to so September is to have the draft finished and send it to be,
Yeah, yeah,
and then more Enzo stuff on the list here. That was for March. Start submitting the edited Enzo book to traditional publishing agents.
yeah. Let's do that early next year. But let's start doing that in like January ish
January.
of 2026. God,
Yeah.
what is time?
Yeah. I mean, never feel bad about having to push stuff back. They push back the Batman part two. So if they can do it, you can do it. Let's see. March 31st, second edit of novel complete, ready for audiobook. Spelling and grammar edits still needed.
When was that
March 31st.
this year?
Yeah. Yeah. This is all
Okay,
from the old.
so we'll just move that to June because that would give me time after Kirsch is done with the second set of edits. So in like June, I'll send that out for like grammar edits and stuff.
Okay. Move that to June.
Honestly, like
May.
how cool though to be able to have the book done, edited fully. I'm happy with it, and then have like a year after that to like promote it. Like how
Yeah.
cool is that? That's honestly like really nice to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it does give you the option toward the beginning of the year to be like, I do want to do, our careers or I want to do whatever, but it lets you really not have to rush the promotion. So, you can really be like, oh, wait, I want to do
And
this.
there's just like a book in my back pocket that I can throw out,
Yeah,
whenever, which is also
literally.
nice.
You're just chucking it at
Yeah.
people.
But I mean like we could get copies of it to just look at and make sure they're good like months ahead of time. We didn't have that luxury with Tyranny of the Fae. We got those like a month or two before they were ready for pre-order.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, you could be like, oh, no, I want to change this or change that. You have plenty of time to really go through with it. And yeah, and moving it a year gives you a lot more time to deal with the audiobook. I mean, that was always going to be like really tight for the finding people and getting that all recorded. Because I mean, I don't know. I haven't really, worked with uh, voice actors, so but I just imagine anything involving that many people is going to be a degree of herding cats. So it's always
Yeah,
good to give yourself some extra time.
and my plan for that, just to sort of lay this out for people, was I worked with Sarah, my voice actor, or my whatever you'd call her, the narrator slash producer for Tyranny of the Fae. My hope for that, I've not reached out to her yet because like it's too early to even like bother her with it. But my hope is that she could produce it still. That way, I'm not doing that part of it because I know that I want to. So if I hire her to do it ahead of time, that I don't have to like cross that bridge yet. And then I'll also have her voice Tess, who is my only white character in the book as a main character. Um, but then she could voice that character, which is fine. And then I could then find like because I really the selling point of the Kickstarter for anybody that hasn't heard this before is to sort of have an audiobook featuring a really widely diverse cast. So I think that'd be very cool because you don't see that often. And then basically each character can have like Karuk can have an indigenous voice actor, Star can have a South Asian voice actor, and all those things because it just sounds really fun to me to have that. And then all that I would then be doing is giving them their chapters, like their character chapters, and have them read those separately. Get that all to Sarah, and then Sarah can just kind of like piece it together, and then she'll do all the like whatever needs to be done for Audible because she's done that so many times that I trust her to just do it without me having to worry about it. So that's the
Yeah,
plan. So hopefully it won't be hard. It'll just be finding the right people and affording them, making sure that I can
yeah,
afford them.
that's always the key. But yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting audio. What do they call that again? It's dramatization or
Yeah. So I'm not going to be doing a full dramatization because that would be like if each character would give the lines of each character or whatever. My
Mhm.
idea, because I just have character, think like Game of Thrones, except first person. I just have each character that have chapters that are in their own voice.
Oh, that's
And then
right.
they
That's
still
right.
will have lines, but they're not going to be doing like they'll be doing character voices for each character as they come up in their respective chapters. So
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's still exciting.
yeah,
Let's
I'm excited
see.
about it.
So for May the 23rd, we had final draft of novel complete, ready for upload. Star Celeste final draft complete, ready for upload. So that was a big that was a big day.
I think they were kind of there almost with the novel. With the shifted dates, I think we're almost there with the novel specifically. Not quite that day, but not far from it.
Yeah. That's
But also like maybe we don't even need to worry about that stuff yet because releasing the book is going to be so far in the future that maybe we don't
yeah.
need to like set those dates yet. That's like a thing for next year.
For having the final draft.
Yeah.
See, set that aside to come back to next year. I'll just not give it a date. I'll just put it under question mark. All right. And then we had, of course, August to publish the novel, which we moved to
But the
August of
same
next
date
year.
for the short story collection.
Yeah. We didn't actually give it a date. We just had August.
Let's put
So,
it
but you said
whatever. So let's
August.
say 12th, I think, because 15th is what I like to do, but that's the Tuesday of the 15th, so that feels.
Okay. Do you know what day in 2026 for the novel?
I guess the same, but so let's look at what that is. So the 15th is a Saturday, so that means the 11th would be the Tuesday before, or the 18th would be the Tuesday after. Tuesday before is probably better because I can be more sure school hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
School could start at least for teachers by the 18th. That feels reasonable to me. So let's say the 11th.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. So, November, we have published Star Celeste book at same time as paperback release of novel.
Then that'll just move to November of the next year. Which probably the 17th sounds right to me. November
17th.
17th.
Okay.
Then the Indo stuff we really can't schedule because I'm querying that. Like I have no control over if that gets picked up or when, or even when it gets published once it does get picked up, if it does get picked up. So
Yeah. We had, let's see, March of 2026, a backup if Enzo book not picked up by traditional publishers, start process for self-publishing.
So I guess that would be. I'm so torn on this one because if we start querying that January of, well, no, January 26th is what I was shooting for, right? Is what I said earlier.
You just said January, but we can say 26.
Oh, 2026. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah, January 2026. Yeah.
Then yeah, that gives me 3 months. Should I maybe give it longer? Do you think that that's fair?
Uh, I don't know. I think maybe you should give it longer.
So maybe like
I mean,
May.
yeah, we could do May. Let's do the end of May.
Yeah. So like
And,
20
we can always,
would be that Tuesday.
and this is just the start process for self-publishing. It's not actually the,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we have August of 2026 was self-published Enzo book, if not picked up by
Okay.
traditional
That sounds
publishers.
good then. That sounds
Well,
actually right.
you, but I mean,
I
you
mean, all I have
would,
to do, because I would have already edited it, because I want to edit it to be happy to send it to agents before that anyway.
yeah.
So all it needs is a grammar edit and a cover, which I could do in 3 months.
But I don't think you would want to release it in August, right? Because you're releasing your novel. You don't
Well,
want those
not of August 26th though.
August of
Right?
2020.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. 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 You're right. So yeah. So maybe move that to like November. Well, no, because that's the
that's when
gonna be
you
the
have
Star and
the
Celeste one.
Star
So
Celeste
then it'd be like March of
of
27.
2020. We could do that.
So there'd be something else coming out.
Okay. So that, I mean, that covers what we had in our previous session here. Let me go through and double check I didn't miss anything in these side notes, stuff that didn't have specific dates.
So here's a kind of like, should I do this or not? I just want to get feedback. So if we're doing the short story compilation, should I do a release for that, like a mini tour, where I go to bookstores, potentially with the authors that collaborated with me that lives in those places? First of all, to help me establish relationships with those bookstores, but then also to help me reach out, like to help sell it or whatever, but then also to have like stronger connections with those writers also.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to like strategically go to the bookstores that are in the cities that the other authors live in, right? That's what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah, because then they're
Yeah.
local authors, but then I could also have a presence there, and then they would know me, and then next time, theoretically, I have learned, if there's any bookstores listening to this, I'm so sorry. But I have learned that if you do an event, if you go physically to a bookstore, they're going to think you're local and treat you like you're local. And that's what I want at the end of the day. Because the thing that is like frustrating as an independent author that doesn't actually write local interest things, because I write general fantasy, I want bookstores all over the country to carry my book, not just bookstores in West Virginia. Because, like, I'm certain there are West Virginians that enjoy my stuff, but not exclusively West Virginians, right? Like, I want people from all over the country to read my stuff.
Yeah.
And most bookstores only ever support local authors. And it's like, okay, but why? Like, what's the logic there? And I've learned that if I can do things like this, where it's like I'm gonna fly in to visit my friend in LA, and they like read a excerpt of their short story with me. I do a little bit of an interview about the book or whatever. I do a reading of my short story. Then that bookstore in the future may think I'm local
Yeah.
and may host me later because they're like, "Oh, hey, we saw that you came out for this. Would you want to come back later?" And it's like 100%. Let's do that. So whenever you're an independent author planning a book tour, like that's just a little tip. This is a little tip from me. Make them think you're local and don't lie about it. But if they presume, that is on them. And you can let them continue to think it. I remember
Thought you knew that I was from out
I
of
went to this
yeah.
adult, I think kind of like an adult book fair in Florida, and they listed me on the imaging as local authors, and I was like, I mean, I am a US author, which is
Yeah.
local. I'm not a foreign author. And I was like, I'm not going to say anything because they made the mistake and they can live with it if anybody calls them out on it. But it's not my mistake. I never told them I was local. So,
Yeah, I mean, if people just presume, then that's not, yeah.
like, never introduce yourself as a local author. Like I'm not saying lie about it, but what I'm saying is don't. If they ask you, say whatever the answer is. But if they don't ask you, like they're probably going to presume you're local, and that is fine. Because I guess for them they don't presume that people like me are going to fly. Because like there's a new gay bookstore in Seattle, right? And like my friend James lives in Seattle, and he's like a decently big deal young adult author. Like I could see him contributing to this short story collection. And if I fly out to that bookstore and visit it, like out of my own money, right? I'm going to pay to fly there and go to this bookstore. I think it's like they probably just presume that I live there because why else would I be there? But it's like that's fine. Like like they can believe that if they want
Yeah.
to.
And typically bookstores do have a special section for local authors, so that'll get your book on that shelf potentially. So,
Yeah, which is also, for the record, I also hate that because like I get it, but I would rather my book be in the fantasy section, right? Because it's a fantasy book. Like I hate I love every bookstore that has my book in their shop. Let's not get me don't get me wrong. I'm thankful to everybody that has my book in their shop. But a lot of West Virginia authors are like Appalachian ghost stories, Appalachia recipe books, like history of the Civil War. And then it's like, oh, and here's this fantasy book that's also in here. And it's
it's
like
that's
this
the
doesn't
same
make
that's the same genre, right? It's all the
yeah. And I would imagine it's like that in most other bookstores. Most local authors are going to be like I'm sure in Seattle it's like history of Washington or like like
yeah.
well like shooting Twilight in Forks, Washington or whatever. Like it's probably just like various local interest things and not things that are like genre based. And so it's like I'd rather my book be in the genre it is than shoved into this section with like various nonfiction about the area. Like it just
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
make
like
any sense.
here's just random books that happen to be from, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a thing that it frustrates me about bookstores is they have that local author section, and it's almost always because whenever it's like whenever I'm with a group of authors, like whenever there's like here's like a romance book, here's a young adult book, then it's like all right, I'm okay with this. Like this makes sense. But my book is almost always next to like cooking with grandma, like Appalachian recipes, and it's like okay, sure.
Now, I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. When are you going to create a recipe book set in, your world?
I've toyed with it, if I'm being fully honest. It's a thing I've thought of because whenever I did promotion for Tyranny of the Fae, one of the websites I wrote a blog post for had me do a recipe, and I wrote a curry recipe from Asia, and I kind of love that idea because I do cook a good bit just anyway, and I love like writing recipes and things, so I would be kind of into it. Food's not a big part of the world, like whenever I write, which is maybe a thing I need to work on if I do want to do this down the road because people need to be like I don't want to just throw in recipes. It's like I presume this exists in this world,
Yeah.
so I maybe need to like intentionally have some things that readers can like latch onto. But like, I mean, maybe that's a thing to think about in this edit, right? Maybe that's a thing to actually like think about including.
Yeah. That's like you need to like shoehorn in like specific. It's like, and then they were eating the family curry recipe.
Well, no, that is sort of a thing. There's a moment in the novel. This is a spoiler, barely, where Star is in his aunt's tavern, and she serves him stew. And I categorize like basically the stew because this is a fantasy, like a westernized fantasy world. Like Anglagel is kind of like the U.S. So the stew is basically curry because they said his mother gave him the recipe, and it's basically just like a curry. Just in a fantasy setting, like your typical like Western fantasy setting, they don't have a word for curry. So I just say stew because it's like a spicy stew kind of thing, right? So there
Okay,
is
so this
that
is,
does exist already. So
so you just need to do that more until you get
yeah,
like the
yeah.
full book. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Kurt and I have like a ton of themed cookbooks from like Stardew Valley and like I think Tomb Raider and like
My
Star
brother bought
Wars.
me some for Christmas this year. I got like a cookbook from like Disney stuff, like Disney animated things. Then I got a
Hmm.
cookbook for Studio Ghibli things, so like Totoro and Ponyo and things like that.
Okay. I haven't actually cooked anything out of the themed cookbooks. I'm like, I have them like all displayed in the kitchen on like the bookshelf, and it's just like, oh, these are nice to look
Well,
at. And one day I need to
and
actually
two,
use them.
like much like we talked about, like various other things we've done along the way, having a cookbook set in a fantasy world is going to make people think that that's such a huge fantasy world. People like obviously there was demand for this. Why would they have made that if there wasn't some demand for it? So it is a
Yeah.
thing that if you release, people will be like, I got to read this fantasy book because if there's cookbooks set in it, like clearly there's this huge
What
demand
would
for it.
be really funny is if someone discovered the cookbook first and was like, I really like these recipes. Oh, wait, this is from a book series. Let me read the series.
Yeah. I think it's plausible that it could happen.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to put that under a question mark. Cookbook release date.
Well, I've also thought about doing the nonfiction book too. That's about like where basically I just gather the advice from the podcast that other creatives have given me. So not just authors, but musicians and things too, and just sort of like writing out chapters that kind of like a compilation of the advice from the podcast. That's another nonfiction I've thought about doing, just because it would be like a way to promote the podcast more than anything, but also like it just would be like a cool thing to exist in the world, you know.
Yeah, educational tool. Yeah, I think that'd be good. Now, you have another nonfiction book that's in the works. I've kind of backburnered, right? The
What are
college
you?
one.
Oh, so
Is
that's
that
not
still
nonfiction. That is a fictionalized account of
okay?
my
Yeah.
time in college, because I'm changing enough names and enough things that it's fictionalized, which also gives
Okay.
me liberties. If I want to change things, I can, because then it's not like, you know, the exact memoir.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I am doing, and the name I was toying with was the Falling for Straight Guy Survival Guide. That's what it was going to be called, because I have a background of doing that in my life, and it just seemed like a thing that might sell well. I guess it's like a romance without any of the romance, you know? Because it can't exist because none of the guys are into it.
An attempted romance
Yeah,
novel.
yeah, yeah. It's like a murder, an attempted. Honestly, not dissimilar. Well, I think we're in a pretty good place then, Dustin. I think that we're so my goals for right now is to just get the novel edited, right? That's the main thing, and
Yeah.
to do it by the end of February is the goal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, to have that done in a couple months, and let's
and then to
see.
start the process of the short story collection.
Yeah, the February 1st, so sending out the email for people and having your theme selected, and then February 9th announcing the Kickstarter. So,
Yeah, that's not bad.
yeah,
So yeah, I feel pretty good. I feel like we're in a good spot. So thank you for doing this, Dustin, to allow us to be recorded while we talk about all this stuff. But also, like,
anytime.
thank you for doing this throughout my entire career. It's been, as I have said, it's been wildly helpful to just have somebody that I can talk to and keep track of all of this stuff for me. Because as an ADHD person, it is so easy to forget things that I prioritize. So being able to check in regularly is wildly useful. But also, I think that even for non ADHD people, it is probably really helpful to have somebody to keep you accountable. So I highly recommend to find somebody that maybe isn't actually Dustin, but somebody like Dustin. If in my experience, basically, if you're somebody like me who has always felt like you've had so much potential that has been unfulfilled, if you have that one friend that keeps saying like you need to be doing this, why are you doing this, go do this, like that's the friend that you should reach out to, because that has been what Dustin has been for me for a long time. Is like he's
I
been
think
constantly
that's
pushing me to do what he believes I'm able to do, which I appreciate.
I think that's how this started, right? It was you were telling me like I want to do this and I want to do this, and I was like, okay, let's set some dates for this. And then it was
Yeah,
like,
because
all right,
we
now we're gonna do this every other week. We're gonna do a phone call.
yeah, so the novel I wrote pretty much on my own, and then I was editing it and it just wasn't going anywhere because I had no idea how to edit, and I was just like, and also it was like the pandemic and stuff, so like, my mind wasn't in a good place anyway. So I started writing the short stories for Tyranny of the Fae just to kind of like do something original and creative, just something new to get myself working again. Then as I was talking to you about the short stories, you were like, so what are you going to be doing with these? And I was like, I don't know. I got like some website I'm putting them on. Like, it's just kind of like on the blog. You're like, well, why don't you just put them together in a book? Like, if you're doing them anyway, why don't you put them in a book? Then that's kind of how this all got together. We made a bit of a strategy for like how to release it. And that's how this whole thing started. And I mean, like, I'm eternally grateful that you pushed me for that, because like I feel like I'm finally doing what I should be doing. Like I started writing because that after my ADHD diagnosis, like just writing every week was like big for me, just to like stick with a thing. But then like it still was kind of like, I think that if anybody is like on the fence about like indie publishing or self-publishing, like get off that fence. Because the truth is, like, I think I've said this in other podcasts. Like, I think that in the industry, professional publishers, unless you're like wildly successful, like a Colleen Hoover, people don't even count your self-publishing stuff as like your career. So like if you feel like it is like gonna be in the way or gonna like taint your legacy or whatever, get that out of your head. It's not going to. The industry doesn't even care about self-published stuff unless it's like wildly successful. Then they care a lot. But it was like just a thing that doesn't sell a lot is not even like on your record really. So like, don't worry about it. You know, like if you're thinking about doing it, and honestly, I think that even if I do ever get a publishing deal, having this experience of like doing everything by myself will make me feel so much better about everything, because first of all, like I'll understand from the publishing side why they're doing the things they're doing because I've been on this side of it, right? But then
Yeah.
also, like, I don't think that I'll feel like it's my only route either. You know what I mean? Like if things go poorly, I'll know that I can always pull out and go independent and not be scared about it, which I think is also useful, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you kind of have a built-in safety net of already having experience without them. So it's like, well, you know, if
Yeah,
you,
I remember for a long time, I remember whenever I was like younger and I like worked in fast food and stuff, I always said like I was never going to be scared of not having a job because I wasn't worried about working fast food if I had to. I was never like too proud to. I am now. I would not want to work fast food now if I could, because I have degrees and things to fall back on
yeah,
that I shouldn't be working fast food. But I kind of feel that way. I think that same feeling, that same like intent, and me saying that when I was younger is kind of how I feel now with self publishing. Is like I'm not too proud to self publish. I don't think there's anything wrong with self publishing. I think there's just like another route. And I've talked to so many like professional authors now, like that have been published traditionally, that have also done self-publishing because like they like having the flexibility to do both.
yeah,
And I think that that's something like that the industry has shifted in that way, where like it's not a taint to do self-publishing, and it's not like a backup plan. It's just like it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like it just is another route. I mean, I talked to JD Barker. That episode probably would have come out by now. This might be a preview. I talked to JD Barker yesterday, and he is just like sort of big deal like suspense writer. He has done collaborations with with James Patterson. So he's like big deal, big deal. And he talked about how like he had done self-publishing initially because he did like the querying process. Sounds familiar. And then he started eventually, like his self debut was so successful that then he started releasing stuff. He got an agent for his second book because like his first one was so successful. And then now he missed self-publishing, like he missed the control that self-publishing gave him. So he was able to talk Simon and Schuster into making a deal with him where he has an imprint at Simon and Schuster. And guys, I go into a lot of these podcast interviews kind of blind. Like I had seen his like press release because his like publicist had reached out to me for this interview. Whenever he said things like "I have an imprint at Simon and Schuster," like in my head, I was like, "Who is this person? How did I not know this about this person?" So
I
what
got,
I'm saying is like self-publishing really does sort of like open doors that you really maybe would have even thought possible, you know? Because I mean, who does that? Who goes to a giant publisher, sells a ton of books, and then says, "Oh, by the way, could you just let me do this, but you still do your part of it?"
yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing to be able to have that ability to be like, I want my own imprint.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I didn't
and
even know
like
that was
that's
a
probably
thing.
very similar to like Brandon Sanderson does now, you know, because like he does a lot of his stuff on Kickstarter now.
Hmm.
I think that it is kind of like once you get to that level, you have options, and I mean, I think the self publishing looks more viable because like what JD Barker told me, his biggest problem was that a lot of the cut was going to the publisher. You know, like so much of the money was going to the publisher that he didn't love that. So
Yeah.
like if you negotiate your own deal, like with an imprint or whatever, you can have a better percentage than you would otherwise.
Yeah. And like, I mean, traditional publishers used to do a lot more. Now they expect, you to do 98% of the stuff.
I have not
So,
interviewed a single author that hasn't been expected to do most of the publishing, like the promotion for their book.
yeah.
Like every traditional author I've interviewed has talked about how that's part of it now. Like that's just part of the job now. Is you got to have like a social media presence. You got to sell it yourself. You got to go on podcasts. You got to do all that stuff. So yeah. And I mean, like the publicist that I talked to, that Lucas guy I talked about earlier,
Mhm.
he works with traditionally published authors regularly, but he sets up their interviews and stuff and they hire him. The publisher doesn't. They hire him, which I mean, insane. Insane.
Yeah. So it's like, we're going to take a giant percentage of your book. And also, you need to do all this stuff that we used to do for you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's the other side of it. That's the other side of indie publishing is like you may as well, because if they're not going to do it anyway.
Yeah. It's
And
definitely not going
like
to hurt anything.
yeah,
It could
and
only
I don't
help.
and like I've always said, like I don't hate the idea of doing hybrid. Like if the Enzo book does get picked up by a publisher, I like the
Hmm.
idea of having a book that a publisher is pushing, because the thing that they have, the benefit they have is they have contacts in like the industry, but also in like media outlets, right? To get like reviews and things from like bigger outlets. But like once they establish me, then I could go back to self-publishing fully if I wanted to after that. Like it wouldn't even like if
Yeah.
they have multi-book deals for me, cool, I'll do that. But like I could, once I have a name established, I kind of feel like my options are a lot more open.
Yeah. Definitely. But uh, if I seemed distracted a second ago, I had sent a message to Kurt, my husband, that, hey, could you top off my coffee? And that was like at the very beginning of the thing, and he was like over here like trying to get my attention. I held up a note that's like, I'm on camera, and then he like did the gesture of like drinking. I was like, oh yeah, here. So he just brought it back to me.
Well, that's very, very kind.
Yeah, yeah,
All right, well, I think I may try to wrap up now, but yeah, like this has been great. I've appreciated, like let's try to maybe talk sooner than, what would
oh
August and
yeah,
now be? Like maybe sooner than May of this year. Maybe
yeah.
in a couple months or so.
Actually, if we
Guys,
remember
do
from previous things, let's go
yeah,
ahead and
guys,
schedule
set it
something
at the
now.
end. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording so that they don't hear when we're, not that they'll like jump into the
Okay,
Zoom
yeah,
call or whatever. But imagine if they just find the link and hop on. But yeah, so if you have somebody like this, always schedule it at the end of the call. That way you don't forget to talk again later. And this happens often. Like sometimes something might come up and you have to move it. You can always move it. You can just keep moving it until you eventually do it. And this is good advice for just having hangouts with friends, by the way. I've done this with friends also. Like, not that you're not a friend, but like this isn't a friend call, right? This is a work
this is
call.
the official. Yeah,
Yeah. But like you can always schedule a plan and it can always get shifted a week. And then even if it has to get shifted 4 more weeks after that, that's fine, because then it will still eventually happen. And that's the
yeah.
goal,
It's
is that it eventually happens.
it's still on the
So
books, so
yeah. All right. So thank you, Dustin. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope this was helpful for you. Most Writers Are Fans is a Starlight King production. Special thanks to our guest, Dustin Whitman. The audio and video for this episode of Most Writers Are Fans is edited by me, Terry Bartley. You can find video episodes of Most Writers Are Fans on YouTube and Spotify. If you'd like to support the podcast, please rate and review it. Also make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to send a message or record a voice message or leave a comment, please visit mostwritersareFans.com. You can also email us at press@starlightkingpress.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid to tell your story.